So let me call to the podium Her Excellency Minister Ursula von der Leyen, who is the Minister of Defense of the Federal Republic of Germany. Please give her a round of applause. Okay.
Thank you very much. Madam President, dear colleagues, members of parliament, excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, just to answer the first question, it's GLOBSEC. So, thank you very much for inviting me to this conference. Well, yes, to a conference that has evolved to be a leading forum over the last 11 years. And it shows that Bratislava and Central Europe are at the heart of our continent when it comes to tackle questions about security. I want to express my highest regards and respects to the young and vibrant organization team. Thank you for your energy, for your spirit, and the impressive achievements for GLOBSEC over the last years. You, the organization team I just met, you represent these enthusiastic young Europeans we need so desperately. And you represent a lot of optimism for the future. And that's what we need for the future of Europe in these challenging times. These are times in which terror is aggressively seeking to destroy our way of life. These are times in which the Kremlin is projecting its power onto its neighbors in a way we thought it belonged to the past. Times in which we face the highest number of refugees and migrants coming to our continent since World War II. And times in which we are still far from having solved the economic and financial problems, mainly in the Eurozone. In sum, the challenge we face right now is twofold. It's security on one hand, but it's also values on the other hand. We just heard about a philosopher, Karl Popper, in one of the first speeches. I want to cite a German poet, Hölderlin, centuries ago, who said, "But where danger is, also grows the saving power." End of quote. And he's right. It just does so in these times. Today, I think we are again on a good path to master both challenges at the same time. For example, we are strengthening security on our continent by staying united in the European Union and in NATO, without giving up even 1 inch, and this is important, of our values of freedom, respect for the individual rights, respect for international law, tolerance, humanity, and solidarity. Because this is the very core lecture of our common European history and of our common European spirit. Even in times of toughest challenges, not to choose between either security or humanity, but to choose a path that combines both of them. And we give proof of that. Today, be it in NATO or the European Union, the United Nations, in OSCE or in special coalitions, many of us Europeans are fighting the terror of ISIS in Syria and Iraq. They are supporting the struggle for a political solution. They are caring for the future of the Middle East because we all know that we are the focal point of terrorism and that none of us can hide away. Our navies, for example, are helping to fight criminal networks of smugglers and traffickers in the Aegean and the Mediterranean Sea because we know this is one of the key factors to fight illegal migration. Our soldiers are providing security and training in Africa, our neighboring continent, because we all know that a lack of security and prosperity in Africa can easily turn into our problem here in Europe. Our governments are deeply committed to adapting NATO's deterrence and strengthening its defense capabilities because we know that only as one united and strong Europe can and will we remain a relevant partner for our Atlantic friends. Ladies and gentlemen, when I was born, this part of the world was separated from mine by the Iron Curtain. Our armed forces were enemies. They were facing each other with mistrust. I stand here before you today because it was the people of this side of the Iron Curtain who never gave up to strive for freedom and human rights. Today, our armed forces fight shoulder to shoulder for a common cause. German Eurofighters conduct air policing in Estonia, in Latvia, and Lithuania. Poland and Germany will mutually assign a tank battalion. We have not forgotten where we came from and what it took to be united. We have not forgotten that in the century-long history of Europe, we have at all times been in need of help and shelter and assistance and support. We have learned what it means to be able to rely on each other, to listen to each other, to trust each other, to discuss occasional differences with each other, and thus to develop solutions for problems we face together. And this, ladies and gentlemen, is the solid foundation on which we are standing. And on this foundation, I'd like to reflect on three topics. First is NATO. In Wales, we agreed on substantial adaptation measures and translated them into action. Our 360-degree approach is a fundamental goal for the upcoming summit. It means that the alliance has to become more flexible, more agile in face of any potential trust. And as threats are developing quickly, our ability to respond must be tailored appropriately. NATO must be able to react immediately, not just within weeks, but in days, within hours. And we must be able to deploy appropriate capabilities. That requires investment. That requires the right input, but it also requires the right output, a concrete output for NATO. And this is the question for all the European countries within NATO. Because in my view, we need to work way more on a framework nation concept that enables us to provide the crucial capabilities jointly, all of us in Europe together. And that would be the best way to show our American friends that we Europeans are ready to carry a larger part of the burden on our shoulders. That's what they expect us to do. Second thought, NATO is adapting to a dramatic change in our security environment. And yes, the Kremlin's policy of power projection, its violation of international law in eastern Ukraine gave us a reason to rethink our common defense structures. And there's no doubt that as NATO, we have to make sure that our allies at the eastern flank are reassured and that we stand together for their security. This is why, for the Warsaw Summit, we will develop an adequate concept for permanent rotational presence of allies, a concept that will show our resolve and that, at the same time, will show our respect for the obligations we accepted in the NATO-Russia Founding Act. NATO is not an organization directed against anybody. NATO is an organization for something that is for peace, an organization for freedom. And from this position of strength, we wish for Russia that returns to respecting the European peace architecture we agreed upon decades ago. This is why we should always be ready for dialogue. It's up to Russia. The second urgent security issue is defeating ISIS. ISIS' agenda is not only to conquer a country or to destabilize the Middle East. It goes far beyond. It goes for the destruction of free society. It aims at our core values. This threat is hybrid, it is multidimensional, and thus our response has to be hybrid and multidimensional. We will have to continue supporting those Iraqis, Kurds, and Syrians who fight for the right cause on the ground. Taking back Raqqa and Mosul is the concrete goal that can be a turning point. We will have to support the new Libyan government and assist with security and reconstruction in a highly complex environment. We have to stabilize Turkey, Tunisia, Jordan, Lebanon. We have to build up resilience against ISIL and its utterly brutal ideology in the region. But we also have to build up resilience against terror in our societies. And the President was just talking about it. We have to put great emphasis on our strategic communication to counter ISIS' highly professional propaganda and recruitment. We know that Paris and Brussels can happen anywhere on our continent. And we know that the fight against this kind of terror will be long, and it will require a lot of strategic patience. Therefore, a lot depends on whether we will be able to prove to the people in the Middle East that we are serious about helping them and that we are serious about a real partnership for a common future as best neighbors. Ladies and gentlemen, the fate of the Middle East is strongly connected to our fate. That's the lesson we learned in the last year, because the migrant crisis taught us this lesson every single day. And this is my third point. As I said, the numbers of refugees seeking shelter in Europe today is comparable to the number of refugees roaming Europe in the aftermath of World War II. Back then, like now, the refugees came here for one reason alone: the basic human desire for freedom, for peace, and for security. And I'm speaking of refugees and not of economic migrants. The refugees remind us of two European core values. The first one is humanity. And every refugee dying whilst trying to reach the shores of Europe shames us. A second is solidarity, solidarity with those who seek asylum from terror and war, and solidarity within Europe. Last year, Europe was overwhelmed by how fast and dynamic this crisis developed. And it took a while for all of us to understand that, yes, we do have a problem of properly implementing Schengen, our external border system. And yes, we do have a problem to establish a reliable and adequate asylum system. I am convinced that by now we are on a good path forward to a real European solution, a European solution that combines security and humanity. A lot has been said about fences and borders in the last month. And I'm not only talking about fences and borders, the actual ones. I'm talking about the fences and walls in our minds and our hearts. Our problem is not different opinions on how to tackle the migrant crisis. Our problem is not the refugees from Syria. Our problems are the root causes for the refugee wave. This is civil war. This is terror. Achieving unity as Europeans on how to secure and defend and control Europe's external borders. Achieving unity on how to take on negotiated legal contingents of migrants. Working together to bring back peace to the Middle East. That, ladies and gentlemen, that would be the real slap in the face of ISIS. These are huge tasks ahead of us, which will perhaps come to define our generation. I believe that Europe can be proud of its achievements and that we have a model to offer to the world. It is a model based on partnership and tolerance, on unity and diversity, dialogue and compromise, respect for other cultures and traditions, and on the ability to find solutions. And based on these values, Poland was able to overcome oppression by Nazi Germany and by the Soviet Union. Based on these values, Václav Havel was able to show the way from dictatorship to freedom. Based on these values, Hungary was able to take the first step in piercing the Iron Curtain. And based on these values, my country was able to master the challenge of reunification. This is how we built our Europe, the best Europe we ever had. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Madam Minister. Thank you. So welcome to the GLOBSEC exchange show, the most popular show in Europe on this subject today. I just want to say, as someone who's a bit of a showman, I know all of you standing up there must be miserable. So let's kind of get over the polite thing and feel free to just walk down there, about 10, 12 seats, just take them. If you stand up there, it's your fault, but don't be shy. Do you agree, Madam Minister?
Yes, yes, yes.
Okay, so this
My
conference...
seat is free over there.
Yeah, take that off. It's no longer reserved. So please come on down.
That young lady over there.
Yeah, come on down.
You can
My
take my
Japanese
place.
friends here, do you really want to stand the whole time? Come on down. Come on down. There we go. Does it feel good? Yeah. Give them a round of applause. Okay. Good. Come on down. Okay. Madam Minister, thank you so much for your thoughts. And let me just open up. If I were a skeptical constituent of yours in Hanover, and I really didn't get this investment, I feel like we've invested enough in European security. What are the most important things that you could say to me as a skeptic that would win me over? And secondly, are your views shared sort of evenly across Europe, or are there areas of strength in those beliefs and weakness as you look around the scene?
Well, yes, I think the first thing I would say is, or argue to, is, you know what? We are relying on so many values we take for granted. But with Europe, it's the same like with the democracy. We have a saying for the democracy that is, if you do not care for me, I'm going to leave you. Signed, your democracy. And that's basically the same with Europe. If we do not care for Europe, all of a sudden we lose it. And then we start to realize what we are losing. The second thing is, all of us know that each of us 28 in Europe, we are irrelevant if we are just the national country that is caring for itself. That is also true for Germany. If we want to have relevance, and we do have relevance, it's as a united Europe, 500 million Europeans. And the third point is, because we are so large and so strong, politically strong, economically strong, we have a responsibility. And it makes a difference whether we care, for example, for the Middle East, or whether we care for Africa or not. If we do not care, the problems are coming home. And these are good arguments to invest in Europe.
As a skeptical Hanoverian, is that what we would call them, Hanoverian?
Yes.
I'm impressed. So let me go to my next question, and then I'm going to go to all of you, and I'm going to remind you to go to your app, if you don't have an app, you're saying you don't have an app, then I may come over and you can whisper to me, but we'll get there. But if you don't have an app, next time bring your iPhones, bring your notepads, but please log them because we're going to try and work them through very quickly. But listening to your speech, it was a mix of sort of some hard stuff and what I would call some idealistic things. So when you talk about liberty, freedom, justice, what we're fighting about, there's a way to do that sentimentally, there's a way to do that from the heart, and then there's the kind of what we would call in America the ruthless Nixonian way, the realistic way, the hard choices. And I'm interested in whether or not you think that there are hard choices inside NATO really being confronted seriously today, or do you see a lot of symbolic gestures that won't actually yield more security but feel good?
No, we have both elements. It's always
We have feel good and hard choices.
Yes, but it's not a feel good. We always have to remind ourselves why we are together in NATO. It's not only a military organization. It's also a military organization, but it's a political organization because we are based on the same values. We believe in the same things. We think that the strongest way to govern a country is the democracy. We believe in the human rights. We believe in freedom and all these things we were talking about. And it's necessary to remind ourselves, and many, many of you know better than me in this room, what it means if there's an absence of these values. And besides this, of course, there are hard choices, because whenever we're talking about military stuff, it's hard choices. So we have to invest in deterrence. We have to discuss what is our responsibility, how we have to reassure those who are the next, for example,
right,
to potential threats. Everybody has to give his or her share to that. And then it's very practical. You come down to defense budgets, you come down to tank battalions, you're talking about soldiers, deployment, and all these things. But the basis why we're doing that, it's because we share the same values and we fight for a free world. And not everybody is sharing that on the other side of those who are fighting us.
Let me take a question from Jonathan Ayal, and I apologize if I'm mispronouncing that, Jonathan, of Rusi in London. Do you think NATO should accept permanent or enduring military bases on the territory of our new member states? Good question.
Good question. First of all, the NATO-Russia Founding Act, I was talking about it. Russia left it, breached international law.
Right.
But I think if we insist on the one and only European peace architecture, security architecture we built, we have to stick to our commitments. So we will not violate it. And it's not a question of permanent basis or not. It's a question of smart movements. And the persistent, enhanced forward presence is a very smart movement. So we have all the abilities for the necessary deterrence. We have to invest in it. The question we should discuss is, as we know, that thankfully the Americans are planning on bringing over a third brigade to all of Europe. What is the share that Europe is giving in to this pledge? So we should discuss that. And how can we smartly organize the forward presence? We started on TACIT, for example. Many of you know that, so that we have an increase in quality in the presence in the eastern countries. It's not only a question of mass, it's a question of class. All these topics are the hot stuff we have to discuss.
So I hear that Donald Trump's people are watching us live online right now. And if you were to tell him what the burden sharing ought to be between European states and NATO and the United States, and where he might be wrong or ill-informed, this is your opportunity. So what should that share evolve to be?
It should be a fair share, and we Europeans know that we have to step up, first point.
And fair means?
Well, we have to do more, invest more. But the whole of us, NATO, because the world is at the moment as it is, we have to invest more instead of pulling back. And I think, unfortunately, all of our countries or societies have made the experience why this is so. Because pulling back or trying to be only concentrated on your own territory and nation does not protect you from being hit by a global attack. Why is that so? Because all of us, we try to benefit from globalization as long as it comes to business, as long as it comes to traveling, having fun, having the positive sides. Politically, we enjoy globalization. But that means also that the same counts for the risks. And 9/11, as well as Brussels or Paris, told us that you cannot have, on one hand, globalization economically and politically, on the other hand, what security matters are concerned, pull back and be just nationalistic. So you have to be globalized too, and that is the reason why we invest in NATO.
I have met a few of the GLOBSEC young leaders out here. I met a young woman from Lithuania that I think may very well be the Minister of Defense in about 10 years.
Whoa.
And when the issue about these rotations through the Baltics and rotation of bases, which you referenced in your speech, is that a toe in the door to doing more down the road? Because when I was being overheard in the audience in the room, someone was sharing with me that Russia, for instance, could move instantaneously within hour or days with no notice, 50,000 troops in sort of a shock movement of that scale. And so that while that base, that rotation of personnel through some of these newer states in the East, again, may feel good, it may not be enough.
There is a lot of presence because the rotation is multinational. So, and
So is that a tripwire?
nobody should underestimate our resolve and our power. So Russia should not even think about trying to think of something like what you just formulated. Once again, we should not too much focus on permanent or not permanent. We should focus on quality. And I've seen over the last 2 years, mainly since Wales, how much Germany, for example, invested in the multinational core Northeast, in the VJTF, how much we build up in the nephews in all of the countries around the area here. The next step we are doing is building up the larger formation to sustain the VJTF if it's once needed. So this is a huge investment in a totally different security landscape in the eastern part of Europe and a completely different quality. So once again, it's a matter of quality. It's not only a matter of permanence or mass, but it's a matter of quality how you're here.
Thank you. An absolutely fascinating question has come in from Jacob Wellenstein from the Konrad Adenauer Stiftung, a comrade in arms, I guess. Do you think Russia and the EU still share certain core values, and are they an indispensable prerequisite for cooperation and possible future partnership? And let me just add something on that. Do you think it was a mistake 2 decades ago not to have provided Russia a pathway into something and just left it outside?
I remember when I started in politics 12 years ago as a Minister of Family Affairs, we were full of hope towards Russia, and we had tons of plans what we could do together. And I was in many Russian-German government consultation on both sides, and we always created new plans for youth exchange, and when I was Minister for Labor, we had
So
many,
the hope was at about a 10?
It was
on a 1 to 10
9
scale?
to 10.
9 to 10, okay. And today?
This could have been possible if 2 years ago, after Sochi, we wouldn't have seen all the development today in the eastern Ukraine we see now. So it was a bitter awakening that obviously Russia does not have the same approach to what I was just talking about as we did. Russia is not our enemy, but it's no more our partner. And as I said, it's up to Russia. The hand is still stretched out. We want dialogue.
So hope is about where on the scale?
I wouldn't pay.
I need to give them something to
we
tweet.
we got we got disillusioned, but you should never close the door, shut a door, because you should always work on over time going back to a relationship that really deserves the name relationship.
So you're not going to give me a number. You're good. Our Norwegian friends out here, or Spanish friends, are asking if Germany will be increasing its defense expenditures over the next years to rise to the level of 2% of GDP.
We had almost, since reunification, we had a long slope downwards and decrease of defense expenditure.
Where is it about now?
It is at 1.17. It will rise to 1.12 for the upcoming years. So we managed the turnaround. We have a rise again. And you're right, it has to rise over quite a period of years. I just showed to the parliament that the investment that we need over the next 15 years in armament will be around 130 billion euros, so that we know what we have to work for. There is a plan forward. Yes, we do need to invest more in it.
On the broad question of thinking about security threats, you were looking at this question of values, but also some of the points where NATO has worked out of area. So looking at Afghanistan, looking at some of the threats abroad right now, and how there's an internal linkage. And I'm interested in whether or not, particularly, I mean, not just in Germany, but throughout all of these countries, there is a tectonic tension you can feel over the question of the refugee crisis.
Mm-hmm.
And how do you, I mean, we're among people who are all struggling with this, but what do you think beyond platitudes really needs to be done to change that dynamic of getting the refugee crisis right? And I know that's about 3 of your questions.
Yeah, I know. First of all, for me, it's a little bit like a déjà vu with the refugee crisis, a déjà vu to the Euro crisis. I'll tell you why. Looking back, I understand that we introduced the euro, which is gorgeous for all of us in the Eurozone. One single money, many advantages. At that time, when we introduced the euro, we didn't have the heart to tell our people about the difficult part that would have been necessary too, that is build up a financial architecture and to give up partly national sovereignty, what finances are concerned, on the European level. We didn't do that. The euro crisis hit because we had this missing link, and under an enormous pressure, we had to rebuild, or we had to build up the financial architecture that is necessary for a single money, the euro. I have the impression with the migrant crisis, it's the same. We introduced Schengen and Dublin, gorgeous. Schengen, no borders anymore, phenomenal, fantastic for all of us. But we did not talk about the other side of the coin that is necessary, that is have an agreement and a common understanding how to protect these external borders. What is our definition of asylum in Europe? What are we going to do with asylum seekers? How are we going to distribute them over 500 million Europeans? And the same procedure right now happens. The migrant crisis hit so hard because we had all these deficits in the system of Schengen and Dublin. We never discussed all the details, so-called details. And now under a huge pressure, we have to catch up and rebuild all these things. How are we protecting the external border? How are we dealing? How are we separating economic migrants from refugees that really are eligible for asylum? And if this is so, how are we dealing with them? How are we giving them shelter? In what country of the European Union? That's the reason why the pressure is so high at the moment being. But I think we all learned our lessons over the last months that there is only one solution, that is a solution of unity of Europe and a European solution. And slowly but surely this solution is growing. We are securing more our external borders, all the details about it. We are discussing with our neighbors, that is not only Turkey, it will be also Africa, how to deal with migrant waves. We are talking about legal contingents. Why is it better than this illegal migration? Illegal migration is always survival of the fittest, and those who are able to pay the smugglers and traffickers are coming to Europe, right. And the traffickers and smugglers are the ones who determine who is coming to Europe. That should not be the case. Legal migration means we take those who are really in need for help, real asylum seekers, eligible for asylum, on a decent and human way. They do not have to give all their money to smugglers and risk their lives in the agency. And then we have to figure out how we distribute them in Europe.
Thank you very much. We have a question from Anonymous, which I think must mean this person's a minister who doesn't want to be quoted. But about Brexit. And one of your colleagues, Wolfgang Schäuble, gave one of the most strongest statements of concern about a British exit from the European Union. This question is asking, since there are so many shared trade and security issues, whether Brexit is just, vapid or empty fear-mongering. And I'm interested in whether you think Brexit will have an impact on the security side of how Europe thinks about its common defense.
Well, we want Great Britain in. It would be a disaster for Europe, and it would be, I think, a disaster for Great Britain too if they leave Europe. So, first of all. Second part, security matters. We need a strong, united Europe as a strong European pillar also in NATO. So for security matters, we will have and we will continue, whatever happens, to work very, very closely with our British friends. But for Europe itself, it would be an extremely difficult situation. So we have to argue and to do everything for keeping Great Britain in.
Ohara-san of the Tokyo Foundation asks, Russia has already started playing a new game in Asia. Do you have some idea of how to cooperate with Japan and other countries?
If I may reflect to one experience we made in Europe, let's think of the crisis in Ukraine. I think we were right not to answer with the same means Russia used in eastern Ukraine, which are the means of a hybrid warfare, because we would have had a bloody war on Ukraine soil. But we, first of all, were able, Europe of 28, to speak with one voice, to show unity, to exert sanctions, and to answer to Russia on that part which is the most vulnerable for Russia, which is its economic basis. Russia has a weak economy. As you know, they have a shrinking GDP. They have a huge demographic problem. So we answered by pointing at that part of Russia which is the most vulnerable one, to make them understood. And for that you need unity, that we want to go back to the peace architecture we had agreed upon. Talking to answering the question.
Our friend from Tokyo.
The friend from Tokyo. I may see that perhaps in the Asian area, many countries who have the same concern could agree together to have smart responses to power projection. For that, you need the assembly of many, perhaps smaller countries, and you need unity. So it's a process worth to undergo it, and that might be something to learn from the lessons we learned.
So let's do a lightning round, because we're just in the last few minutes. Does NATO need its own hybrid war capability?
Yes, it does work on it.
And
sure, absolutely, we need it all. We need strategic communication, for example.
Okay.
We need cyber capabilities. We have them.
Right.
We need all the traditional ones, but strategic communication, for example, is one of the things you learn a lot.
What is the
last
United States not doing that it should be doing? Is it doing its fair share? It always blames, I mean, recently my colleague in The Atlantic wrote about the Obama doctrine, and President Obama talked about free riders in Europe not doing enough. Is there something the United States is not doing enough that it should be doing?
Well, it's not my position to blame the United States, because I know that us as Europeans, we have to step up. The Americans expect us to do so, and if we step up, then we can pull ourselves together with the Americans to step up even further.
On the values front, are you worried about some of the internal shifts and changes going on inside Turkey that are more and more in the press?
Well,
As a NATO ally.
I know, but it's the good part is because we are working way closer now with the agency, for example, the NATO mission, the agency with Turkey, it's the time where you start to discuss it much more broader. And this is the first step to change.
And what are you cooking up in the German defense white paper? You know, I know it's coming. We
It's
don't
coming,
know
no,
when.
but-
I just wanted to slip that in
Well-
right at the end. What do you think are the zingers that Ursula von der Leyen will hit? It will be your imprint on Germany's security future down the road. What are the big things you're angling for? And try and put them in tidbits of 140 spaces or less.
We're ready to take up responsibility and to take up leadership from the middle. And we know for that we have to invest.
Let me ask one last question. We have here from our friend in Kurdistan, you mentioned we need to work together instead of closing our doors on global problems. ISIS is a global problem. How does Germany plan to advocate increased international support for the Kurdish Peshmerga fighting ISIS on the ground? And we'll finish with that provocative note.
We have an excellent, whoever the Kurdish representative here in the room is, we have, as you know, we have an...
Nergiz
Where
Abi.
is he? Oh, wonderful. Good to see you again. Yes.
Thank you for using your phone.
Yeah, great.
Yes, great. You're learning. You guys did so well. We had some more questions than we can handle. I've got about 30 more up here, and we'll submit them to you in writing and
All right.
expect you to respond.
Thanks so much.
Yeah, go ahead. On the Kurds.
On the Kurds. So we are deeply impressed on your courageous fight against ISIL. They were the ones who protected the Yazidis. They were the ones who proved as the first that ISIL can be defeated. And therefore, it was a good and is a good investment, the formation and the equipment of the Kurdish Peshmerga, and we will go on. Thank you.
Great. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to, before you thank Madam Minister, I want to tell you that refreshments are available outside in the lobby. We're going to come back in half an hour at 2:15. That is not in your printed program, but that's how we're doing it today. We're going to be with my buddy, General John Allen, talking about fighting Daesh. But first, please, a great round of applause for Madam Minister Ursula von der Leyen.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
you.